Hi, welcome everyone. Today we're talking to Martina Stephany from the animal welfare organization Four Paws. She's the director of farm animals, and we're going to talk to her about transport of live animals by sea, and specifically about the ship the Elbeik, which has just arrived in Spain. There are 16 male calves on there, and your organization was there, and you also have news about the Elbeik.
Yeah, that's right. So we are working on transport since months and years, actually. So we have a campaign on live animal transport. And when we heard these news about the Karim Allah and also Elbeik, we couldn't believe it. But actually, I mean, it's one more accident on our list of tragedies. So it's bad and it's horrible, but the more horrible thing is that it's not the first time. But what really shocked us was that we heard that the harbor would start working again. So after the thing with Karim Allah happened just 2 weeks ago, I mean, they killed almost 900 cattle. But no matter what, they just started to load ships again. And we wanted to see that with our own eyes because we couldn't believe it. And actually, we went there with a very small team because of Corona, of course. And we were shocked to see how so many trucks with cattle and sheep arriving again. And I mean, I'm working with Four Paws since 10 years, but still, like, whenever I'm really out there and see the animals with my own eyes, it's heartbreaking. You can smell it, of course. It stinks near to the harbor, and it's so interesting because there's just a normal sidewalk, so people are walking by, and then you have this entrance to the port, and there are the trucks standing in line. So every 5 minutes, one of the trucks stops. Then they do some paperwork. Someone comes out of this harbor building, and probably they just say, hey, this is me, this is my company, this is the number of animals I have here. And then they are just passing by. And during this time, it's like really 5 to 10 minutes that one truck is just standing there and you are eye to eye with the animals. And some people went by, and I mean, they were dog walking or on the way to the beach. It was quite nice weather last week. And they said, oh, I never realized this is happening here. What's happening? So people don't really know about it, and they are shocked to see these animals. And these animals are coming from across Europe. So we know that they already have a couple of days of travel behind them. They have a very high density in these trucks. Many of them probably didn't have the chance to really like get some water, get food, because they are standing so close together. And they are curious, they are curious, and they look at you and they want to know what's happening. And it's so heartbreaking to know that the even more terrible part of the journey is just about to begin, and that they will then be sent to one of the countries where they will be probably and most likely killed without stunning. So it's horrible to witness that and to look into their eyes and to just know, okay, this is your trip to hell and this is the trip to your death.
And what makes it also really sad for the animals on the Karim Allah and the Elbeik, and I think more animals that you've seen too, is that they're young, they're calves, right? They're less than 1 year old. They're still babies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, of course, most of the animals who are dying in the farm animal industry are more or less young, because most of them just live for a couple of months. But here, especially with these young cattle, that I guess they have been 8 months old when they were loaded, and now they are traveling since 3 months. So they spent most of their life on the ship, actually, or at least a big part of their life. And I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I don't know if you saw the pictures. They are so beautiful animals, and I mean, if you at the same time, I always try to watch videos of rescued animals in between just to make sure for my own mental health that I can somehow cope with the situation. And if you see then on the one hand, cattle just like having a good life, the ones who are rescued, and then the other ones who are just there. And also the footage of last week that many animal welfare organizations and we as well published, you can see them standing on this ship really like each one next to each other. Some of the animals are, you don't know if they are sick or already dead or just lying, but they are like standing on other animals. And they are so close together, they can barely move. And this is for 3 months, I imagine it's like standing in an elevator full of people, but not just for like a minute, but for weeks and months. I mean, that's horrible. And also the smell and the stink, and knowing that no one takes care on this ship of the animals. So if anything happens to them, if one of them gets sick or maybe injured or has a broken limb or whatever, nothing will happen because no one is really checking on them. The only thing they do is if they find a dead animal, they just send it overseas. They just throw it into the water. And we are not even sure if those animals are really dead, you know. So it's such a horrible system. I can't believe that this is still happening, and this is kind of okay with the authorities.
And then the Elbeik like arrived on Friday in the port of Cartagena.
Yeah, actually Thursday night, but I guess they arrived after 10. And in Spain, you still have these, what's it called in English? People can't go out after 10, between 10 and 6.
The
lockdown, exactly. And the restrictions of going out and leaving the house. And first they went to some outside position out of the harbor. And then in the morning, they really entered the harbor with the ship. Yeah.
And then the animals, there was discussion whether the animals were going to be killed or whether they were going to be resold. The option of reselling that was even on the table is extremely shocking from Spain.
Absolutely. Again, we couldn't believe it when we heard this, you know, because these animals have gone through hell already. Some of them died. The ones who are still alive are for sure really weak. And I mean, they are not only dirty, but we know that after these long trips, many of them also have fungal skin diseases because they are literally standing on their own feces for weeks and months. And actually, there was the discussion, and not just the discussion. We learned that there was already a buyer in Libya who said, yeah, I will take these animals because obviously this blue tongue disease was not really confirmed. So seems like there was no reason not to sell them. And also the port of Cartagena did not want to take these animals back in because they are no experts in killing animals or in taking care of them. They are kind of just a harbor that is collecting these animals and then sends them in all kinds of different countries. And they were also not happy about the Karim Allah case because they had to stop their normal business during that time, and they were not able to send ships out while the cattle of the Karim Allah had been slaughtered. So for them, it was simply a money question, and they are not really prepared for it. So they didn't like it, and they don't feel responsible. So I don't know if you already also read these news that last week there was a long discussion because Cartagena said they don't want to have more animals and they don't want to take in this ship. And there was a discussion because the Spanish authorities said, yeah, but you have to. And they didn't want to because of the money loss that they have if they take in these animals. And also they are not prepared for this. So from the Karim Allah, we know that there had been some kind of tents where the animals had been killed, and some media spoke of euthanasia, but for sure they did not get some kind of good night drink to die, but we don't know. Actually, there was no transparency how they have been killed, but we know that the normal slaughter, like with first like making sure they are unconscious and then cutting the throat, is not possible because where do you want to go with all the blood? You can't just like put it into the water. You normally need special facilities to make sure the blood is collected and then like disposed.
Yeah.
And of course here this is not possible. So what we assume is that probably maybe they have been shot, or maybe they have been first made unconscious and then they cut something in the neck, but we don't know. And there is the possibility, since there was no independent inspection of this, that maybe some of the animals still there suffered again and had a painful death.
But there's no, how do animals usually get killed in Spain? They usually get shot, right, in the head, or what's the normal way to kill animals?
It's you first have this shot here in the head to cause the brain damage, and then they are unconscious, and then you hang them, you cut the throat, and then they die from the blood loss. Actually, that's the normal death. But this is something where this harbor is not prepared for, and we know that no animal welfare organization was able to film the culling, so we actually don't really know how they died. And also know with Elbeik, the latest news is that although there was this buyer from Libya, obviously the authorities and some inspections figured that these animals should like put down now.
Yeah.
But we don't know how this will happen. We know from just 10 minutes ago, a colleague who is still in pain in Spain, sorry, but also in pain for sure, but who's still in Spain, witnessed that they are now loading more food on the vessel, and this means that probably, I mean, it will take a couple of days to kill 1,600 animals, and
Yeah.
also I can't believe that they are still there on the vessel. I mean, why is the harbor not prepared to at least unload them and give them a little bit of space and rest before they die? I can't believe this. It's so inhumane. This whole system is so wrong and sick. So I mean, we really have to make sure that this is not just one more tragedy on our list of tragedies. This needs to be the end of exporting live animals.
It is, but I'm still in shock that you're saying, because I true, we also on the animal unit said euthanizing, so we kind of assumed, because we also heard the cost for that was $1 million. We kind of assumed they got a shot somehow, they were killed in a very humane way, but it's that nobody was allowed to look at it, and like to know that these animals have suffered for 3 months. And we saw videos of the Karim Allah when the animals walked off the ship, and that was, I don't know if you saw them, of course, too, but the way they were walking, like they could barely still walk because they had been on a ship for 2 months. Like as humans, if we stand still for like 2 months or sit and stand and sit and stand, walking will be extremely weird all of a sudden. And it was so heartbreaking to see that they were walking off that ship. They're like 9 to 10 months old. And then and to know that even they received a painful death is like, yeah.
I mean, we don't know. It's just an assumption. But, the thing is that there was no transparency. And we know that also the EU Commission raised questions to the Spanish authorities and they did not answer. So we simply don't know this.
No.
But what we know is that this harbor is not prepared for mass killing of cattle who are big animals. And for sure, we can only assume that the owner of the animals will not say, okay, let's spend a lot of money on giving them a peaceful death, because obviously the business is animal trade. So obviously he does not care about the well-being of animals. But it's heartbreaking. And, in a way, my team and I, we are relieved that these animals are now not sent back to the sea and back with the vessel on their journey. But also being relieved because you know that someone will die now, and just for nothing, I mean, their whole life was unnecessary suffering from the beginning till the end. And now not even, I mean, we can discuss eating meat, but not even they will be eaten by anyone. So it's no sense of all. They are treated like trash, basically. And this is something that needs to change, because every car is treated better on their way to the new owner. If you really compare the trucks with new cars that you see on the highways sometimes, and then you see the trucks loaded with animals, you can't believe that this is still happening in our century.
There was we wrote an article yesterday. Yesterday was Meat Out Day, I think, like a day that started in the States that you don't eat meat. And they have a quote on there, and it basically said that we always talk about as humans, is there life after death? And they quoted, and that hit me so hard, saying that for farm animals, there's no life before death. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. And especially these animals, these are babies, and they're for 3 months on, like, usually, I mean, sea transport is already horrible, but it's 10 days, 2 weeks. And then, like, to think that to be killed is like the end of your suffering. And but the second thing that was shocking is that Spain knew, I think Four Paws also reported on this, Spain knew 3 days after they had left, there were 2 ships, Karim Allah and the Elbeik, and Spain knew 3 days after the Turkish authorities had sent them a mail, which Eurogroup for Animals released that mail. It's also on our website, saying we will not accept these animals because they might have blue tongue disease, and we will not accept them. And they got that mail, they knew it, and they did absolutely nothing. And I read a quote from you that the reason why they did nothing is once the ship had left European waters, it's very complicated to get the animals back.
Yeah, and actually these harbors are not made for importing animals, so no one really feels responsible for tracking the way the animals are going. For the Spanish authorities, it's like let the vessel start, like load it with animals, and then like send it off, and then it's off their radar. They don't really care what's happening then. And this is a failure in the system. And actually, I mean, we talk so much about what's going on these vessels and how bad the animals are treated, because they are more or less abandoned. No one really cares for them. There's no vet on board and everything. But to be very clear, we don't want to see improved animal welfare on these vessels. We want to see a ban of the export of live animals both ways. On the one way, of course, via ship, the seaway, but on the other hand, also to other third countries within the European outside the European Union, but like by trucks, because these long distance transports are always horrible. And I mean, even the shorter ones are horrible, but I mean, the longer the journey, the more problems occur, and the more we know that there's no resting station. The people who work there, the drivers of the truck, are not really experienced, or they don't know how to handle these animals. And the list of problems during these journeys is so long that it simply needs to stop. It needs to be banned. And we know that the existing regulation is weak, but it's not even fully enforced, and there are no penalties if people don't follow the rules. So that's why we, on the one hand, need the revision of this guideline, but on the other hand, we really need an immediate ban of live animal export, starting with Spain and Romania, but then for the whole EU.
Yeah, because this is like I think it's last year Romania had the 40,000 sheep. I think it was 40,000 out of my head. But the ship left the harbor of Romania. The ship fell over. People just let all the sheep drown there. But that was big news. It was world news. Everybody reported on this. Everybody was appalled. It's the European Union. It's Romania as part of Europe. Everybody was appalled. But then while that happened, in those days, still ships left with sheep. And so why is the EU and Spain and everybody can see whether you eat meat or not, that this is not the way to go about it. Like, this is just, it's not a discussion of eating meat, but why, with Romania making such big headlines back then, and now this happens, why is the EU still allowing this?
I guess the problem is that there is this ping pong game of who's responsible. And when it happened in Romania, there was an investigation, and then the outcome was, Romania has to take accountability, and that was it. And there the EU at least says that they cannot, it's not their area, and this is something the member states need to do. But I mean, this is already a failure in the system. If there is a EU regulation, then the EU also needs to make sure that these rules are followed. And I mean, the good thing that happened after the tragic with the Queen Hind, and by the way, these 180 sheep are well. The one who we were able to rescue, they are still well. They are having a good life now. But I mean, the thing is that they then put live animal transport on the agenda of the German EU presidency in the past 6 months. And now we have this ENIT committee who is looking into the regulations and who wants to try to change something, at least some people in this group. And these things take so long, and that's why we keep saying we need the immediate ban first, and then we can look into how can live animal transport happen at all in the EU. But more importantly, we need to look into starting the alternative, and the alternative is already there. It's transporting meat and carcasses and also semen instead of live animal. So what we really need is a different system in Europe that makes sure that there are more regional slaughterhouses, and that every farm animal is to be sent to the closest slaughterhouse. Because at the moment, the system is that the traders just send the animals to the slaughterhouse that pays the most. So it doesn't matter how far it is away. They will be sent wherever it's most profitable. And that's the first failure in the system. These animals should be sent to the closest slaughterhouse, and then there should be cooling facilities to transport the carcasses. And this would also be okay, or should be okay, for the countries who now import the animals, because it can still be halal, and probably be even more halal, to not let these animals suffer so long before. So there's actually no reason not to change the system. And for Four Paws, it's super important to start this change of the system now and to get ready for the future of trade. Because of course it's always hard just to say stop this business, because people will say, yeah, but that's my business, I need to live from something. But of course here it would be possible just to change the way they trade meat and animals, and the way would be to only transport dead animals instead of alive ones.
Yeah, and that is, and you make a really good point. Like the way this business is, everybody's appalled now. Everybody's appalled about the Karim Allah and the Elbeik, but it's going to continue because it's a business. So to change a business, you have to offer people something else to make their money with. And because also we talked to Maria Boada Sanya she's a veterinarian at the Animal Welfare Foundation earlier, and she was in contact with the Elbeik, for instance, and the people there, the workers on the ship, that's also just their job. So they're trying to do whatever they can to help these animals within their possibilities and everything. It's such a complicated thing to just say, okay, this is bad, you guys are bad, and it should stop. It's the trade has to, and like you said, to send there. I don't see like this option that you say now. I think there have been talks about this, like, why don't we just send meat instead of live animals? But it's been talked about for years now. I think your organization also, and more organizations, and I hope that the EU just makes a decision. Like at one point just says, we're just going to do this. Because if you just imagine like the Elbeik, to just, those animals have been, I think it's one of the longest times the animals have been on a ship. Like we got a quote from Maria back then saying that even after a few days, these animals are sitting in their own shit. So as humans, like if we're sitting in our own shit, like something you can't even imagine, they're sitting in their own shit. For some reason, we find it okay for animals, not for humans, but okay for animals. And then they're sitting in their own shit. So after 3 months, the pictures you see, that's not like dirt on the floor. That's their own shit on the floor. It looks like mud or it's something soft, but they start off with a fresh floor. And it's basically, so they're like, everybody has a dog, or most people have a dog or a cat, and a cow is no different. So, and these are babies just like looking to play, to run, to be in grass. And everybody who sees this knows this is horrible. And it shocks me that Spain, they're also human beings there, but it shocks me that the ship has entered the port now and the animals are still left on that ship. So as we speak now, you and me are talking, they are still on that ship, even though they've been at the port.
Yeah. That's true. That's true for days. And, the past week being on this trip was it was exhausting for the team who was there. But it's of course, if you think of the animals, how must they feel being on this journey for weeks and months and still being there and not knowing what's going on. And it's horrible. It's absolutely inhumane, and we really need to make sure that this is not happening again. And as I said earlier, it also feels strange to know we are kind of relieved that they will die now in the next days, but still, why? Why is this happening? And still, until now, there was no real investigation of how this happened, that because of this rumor of the blue tongue disease, countries then didn't want to buy the animals, and even didn't want them to access the ports because they were afraid that this disease could maybe spread. But, this could happen anytime again that a ship is leaving, because there is no system making sure that this is not happening. And as we could see here clearly, there is no way of being prepared for taking animals back in. So the system is actually not working the way it's happening now. So this is why it really needs to stop.
Yeah, and that's also because it's also proven now. There's a mail saying that the Turkish authorities said you cannot go back. So it's already proven. So there should be some accountability. There should be some consequences this time. Like in Romania, a good thing happened, that they're going to talk about it in the EU, and there's questions now and there's an investigation. But in this case, like Spain knew it and Spain could have prevented it. But then I'm sure their hands are tied. They didn't know what to do. So they were just like, okay, we'll just let it happen and see what happens. And even to humans also, they did this to those animals, but they also did this to the people working on that boat, because the people working on there have been on the ship for 3 months also.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Again, I think it's super important to think about the alternatives because, of course, for Spain, I mean, this is one of the income factors,
Yeah,
probably. I mean, they, of course, do a lot of tourism, but also now with the pandemic, of course, this country also needs to see how they can make money. So I guess it's super important to say we don't talk about a ban on of this business at all. We just talk about the ban of live animal export.
yeah,
So why not change towards this other system of transporting meat? And also, I mean, it's just a side effect, but yeah, they are standing on their own ship, but it might be that a little bit of it is just thrown into the ocean. You know, maybe the workers do a little bit of cleaning. I mean, what can you do for 1,600 sheep? Of course,
yeah,
you can't keep them clean. And yeah, but still, I mean, probably they just throw it into the ocean, which is also not very ecological, right? To just like put it right in there. So yeah, I mean, this system needs to change. And yes, it's important to say that Spain is accountable, but this cannot be the end of the story. There need to be big penalties, and there need to be really a ban by the EU that is not to be discussed with all the member states. And we know that some countries already say here and there, we don't really like this export, and sometimes also for example, when trucks start from Germany, the document says Spain is the destination, but it's not true. It's just one of the stops on the trip to
yeah.
hell, you know. And that's why, yeah, this whole system needs to be redone, and it's important to review the transport guideline, but moreover, really start working on the alternatives and make them more and more mandatory. You know, we need to
Yeah.
now start to build up the system of transporting meat to then at some point to say, okay, this is the only way we transport animals.
And you just made an interesting point also that there's also these, for instance, we're based in Holland. Holland has banned this, but today also in news it was that they go to Spain. So there are Dutch cows that are by the tag you can see that are now they were discovered in Lebanon, but they just they have all these ways around these regulations. So on paper it looks as if Holland is not doing this, but they're sending their animals to Spain, and from Spain they go to Lebanon. So
Yeah.
it should be really looked. It should, like you said, it should be a complete ban. And what will happen? You have two members of your team still there. What will happen the coming days? Do you know how when they'll start killing the animals of the Elbeik?
We don't know when it will start, but we will, of course, try to get pictures of it as much as possible. It's interesting because we talked with different companies in Cartagena to get their help, for example, with drones, with these flying drones, or also with boats, because we thought maybe it's easier to get some pictures from the water. And actually, they were all very helpful until they realized that we are an animal welfare organization who wants to film the ship. And then all of them said, oh no, sorry, the ship is broken, we can't do this. And it also shows that obviously these people kind of they hold together, like they don't want to work against each other. And to me, this is also a sign for probably the fact that the city of Cartagena needs this income, and that's why they don't want to damage it. But yeah, so the people who are still there on the ground will definitely try to film everything they can. They managed to film the deloading of a couple of dead animals from the sea, which is also horrible because they just pick them on one leg or just the leg. And that's also horrible, but I hope that these animals had been dead before. So yeah, but we will try to witness everything. And beside of that, and more importantly, of course, we are very active in Brussels, and we are talking there to the different stakeholders. And we are also right now preparing a report on the transport of meat and carcasses. And we show some examples of where this is already happening and how traders still make good money with it. And I guess that's very important. We will publish this in the next upcoming weeks, and then try to lead the discussion more into this. How does the future of trade look like, and what needs to happen now to make this happen and to really ban live animal export at all?
And what is Four Paws stand on? I think Ireland said they might do it by plane, transporting animals by plane instead of.
No, that's no option. No, we don't want, as I said, we don't want to just improve export, or we don't want to find new ways to trade live animals. trading live animals in general is a bad idea, and it cannot be appropriate. And I mean, as most of these animals are sent to be killed anyways, I mean, some of them first are fattened and then they are killed. But, we should at least prevent the suffering as much as possible. And the easiest way is to limit live transportation as much as possible. So we still say the longest time should be 8 hours. And then depending on species, for poultry, we say 4 hours. And we say that there should not be transport of unweaned calves, for example, because this is happening as well. So there are steps in between to look at, but definitely sending them on a plane is not a future business model. No.
It should just be a ban of live animals, and they should be slaughtered at the closest by, like you said, they should be slaughtered at the slaughterhouse that's closest by, and then just transport meat all over the world instead of.
And I mean, for cattle, there is even the possibility of being slaughtered on the pasture. This is happening in Switzerland, for example, not in a big scale, but it's allowed there. And of course, the more member states of the EU would allow this and would go into it, I mean, this would be, if there is something like a perfect death, it would be it, because, they would just be on the meadow. There would be no transport at all. They would just be killed and then brought to the next facility to make sure that they are prepared for transport of the carcass. But I mean, overall, I guess we can't say this enough. As long as people eat so much meat, there is a sick system behind it. So the best thing people can do, because we are always asked, what can I do? I'm just one person. What can I do? The first thing, of course, is look at your own actions and just make sure that you try to at least reduce meat. And if you eat meat, look where it's coming from, if there is an animal welfare label on it. But the best thing is really to look into alternatives and limit animal protein as much as possible. And also, it's good to sign the petitions of the different animal welfare organizations, because we do lobbying and we do speak to the stakeholders, and we try to run campaigns not only to talk about this, but really to change the system. And for us, it makes a difference if we can say, look, this is the number of people who are standing behind us. It's not just some weirdo animal lovers who have this request. It's actually a majority of European citizens who does not want to see this cruelty anymore.
Yeah, and that's completely true. And it's also you're based in Germany, I'm based in Holland, and we always think that first we see the story and we think the meat we eat that didn't happen to. But most farm animals, and for instance in Holland you have eyes on animals, and there are some farms, very small farms, that if you still want to eat meat, I always say try to then do it at least at a small farm. And if people give the argument, but that's too expensive because the meat is usually expensive, then eat less meat and save your money and eat in one time a week instead of everyday meat. Or, just try to find ways around supporting then farmers who are trying to somehow maintain the welfare of animals.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And it's also good to think a little bit more and just get the information about, I mean, these animals now on Elbeik are meat animals in a way, so they are raised for fattening. But I mean, if you look at the whole milk industry, for example, I mean, we have the problem that there are male calves and they don't give milk, but they are also not raised to be fattened, because it's a different line. So these animals are kind of produced for nothing. So they are also transported long ways. And for example, also there are dairy cows who are transported pregnant and then sent to slaughter sometimes. So it's a horrible system. And even if you just if you look at the milk system also, people who still want to drink cow milk should be very careful where they buy it, because there are only a few farms in Europe who do mother bonded rearing, for example, and people simply don't know about that. But I guess with the growing alternatives and the, let's say, booming plant-based market, of course, it also gets easier to choose alternatives and to do more compassionate shopping choices.
Yeah, and I think for Holland and for Europe that looks good. I think the plant-based market. The sad thing is that worldwide in Asia and in Africa, the meat consumption is getting bigger. Most of the live transport, the stories we make, they always go to the Middle East and part of Africa, these animals. So there's a huge demand over there. And it's Four Paws does really good work. Other animal welfare organizations are doing the same. I think Europe is on their way to a good like a ban should, I mean, I cannot imagine the European Commission doing this investigation on transport by sea and say, oh, it should still happen. I can't, that would be a really weird outcome if that would happen. So
Yeah, I agree.
But then it's still the problem that worldwide we're still eating a lot of meat.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, we have to start somewhere, and the first thing is to improve the farms and the slaughterhouses and everything here. And then, of course, also to look at the export, because that's also a problem. For example, in Germany, people eat less meat over the years, but still there are more animals fattened and raised because they are then ready for export, and
Yeah.
and that's a problem in the system. And that's why I guess we need to start here and also look at all these trade agreements, because as long as there's free trade, the being cheap model will still win. And that's of course also a problem of capitalism. And this is now like going too far. But at the end of the day, this system is leading to a system that is exploiting animals and that does not take into account that we are talking here about sentient beings,
Yeah.
And I mean, we know so much about how animals communicate, how they have social systems, how they have emotions, and still we treat them like this. And this, yeah, as I said, it's an outdated system and really needs to end.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Martina. We'll stay in touch with you about when the progress of the Elbeik, like basically the outcome is the animals will be killed. I'm still hopeful that there's some sanctuary in Spain that says we'll take 2 animals somehow. I look at that. That would be. I think we even wrote with we're a news website, but I think we had one sentence that Spain should also offer the option of a few animals being sent to a sanctuary. Like,
yeah, that would be great for these animals. Yeah. But still, even if they do this, this is not the end of the story, right?
No.
The end of the story needs to be that the system is changing and actually live animal export is banned. So this is a little bit the downside I see. If there would be a rescue, that people would just celebrate this and then the story is over.
No,
so,
I completely agree.
Still,
it's just like we've talked about. It's like during this this interview, it's to imagine those like there's, as we speak, like so many, I think millions of animals suffering as you and me speak. But just because we heard about the story became news. And just thinking about these animals so young on that ship, just shitting and eating and then getting here, and then they'll get shot through the head or they'll get their necks, however they will be killed. It's an extremely heartbreaking story. Their life was basically for absolutely nothing. They're just born for the fun of it.
Yeah, that's true.
But keep up the good work which you do with the ban, and I hope that that you and me can one day have that interview where you can announce there is a ban on live transport of live animals.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for watching.
Thanks for having me.